Hello and welcome to Chess Please. Now, if you look up how to improve at chess, every single source that you find will mention solving more puzzles. Or they might say do more tactics. What they really mean is solve more puzzles. And I find that advice is a little bit like that meme of how to draw an owl, where it's like step 1, draw a circle. Step 2, draw the rest of the owl. Like, it's good advice, but it doesn't actually give you any sort of playbook or step-by-step process on how to solve those. So today I want to share some of the tools that I would use when I'm going through puzzles and trying to get my reps in. Now, not only are puzzles really fun to solve, it's like a crossword or a Sudoku or Wordle, just a nice puzzle to solve, they are applicable to all levels of chess expertise. So whether you're a beginner, novice, advanced, master, whatever it might be, puzzles are only going to help you sharpen the saw. And finally, they actually are a great warm-up to when you want to play longer form games. So if you have an account where you really care about the rating, before you jump in to start playing games, puzzles are a great way to just get the juices flowing, get yourself into the chess mindset, rather than starting the engine cold and realising you're down a piece before the game has really begun. So, without further ado, let's look at how we solve some puzzles. So the first bit of advice that I would give when you start off trying to solve puzzles is a very well touted piece of advice, and it actually is kind of 3 pieces of advice. So when looking for your candidate moves, you want to follow this process. First, you look for checks, then you look for captures, then you look for threats. Checks, captures, threats, in that order. First move, check. A great way to solve puzzles is to look at the forcing moves, and there is no greater forcing move than a check in chess. So looking at this puzzle we have on the screen here, looking at some candidate moves, going through my flowchart, I'm looking at the checks. We actually only have one check available. We've 2 checks available. We have queen to f8. That doesn't look any good. The rook can just take here. But we also have queen to f7. And that is the move here, because we bully the king into the corner. And we see that if we say our next check that we have available, f8, the one we discounted earlier on, is much better now because the king isn't defending that square. So he can sacrifice the queen, the rook takes, and that's the solution to the puzzle. That is also just like a classic chess.com puzzle, that bullying the king into the corner. They always like that, just like stand in front of the king, shove him into the corner, sacrifice the queen, push the rook in. They love it for some reason. So looking at this next puzzle, we're going to use that exact same framework: checks, captures, threats, and seeing the checks that we have available. That's the first thing on our list. I see that we have knight in here to f4, that's check on the king, but the queen's just going to take the knight and we've nothing after that, so we're going to rule that one out, put that aside. We might come back and visit it if we're at a dead end, but at the moment it doesn't do anything for us. The next check that we have looks a little more promising, but not really. So we move our bishop here, check on the king here. They're not really going to move their bishop to block here, because then we take and we take their queen. So what they'll probably do is we go check. They'll probably just move their king here, and you might think, great, we win a rook, we win an exchange. But that brings me on to a nice little spliced in bit of advice among checks, captures and threats, is when you don't know what's going on in a puzzle, when it's a really complicated puzzle with a ton of pieces on the board, what you want to do is count the material. Count the material for both sides. It'll orient you in terms of what's going on. It's a good way to practice full board vision, all of the pieces on the board. It's also a good idea for like brainstorming the different material available, and it just helps you understand like what the win condition of the puzzle is. Because if I look at that and we say, okay, bang, king will move, we win the rook, you say, great, we win an exchange. But if we count the material, we're already down an exchange. We have 2 minor pieces and 1 rook. They have 2 rooks and 1 minor piece. So winning an exchange is only going to bring us parity, and generally these tactics have a little more than parity in mind when looking for the win condition or the solve. So this check I'm not so crazy about. And that's really all the checks that we have at the moment as far as I can see. So now we move on to captures. Captures, we have bishop here, doesn't really do anything, not particularly forcing, don't love it. Also a drastic blunder. What else do we have in terms of captures? We have queen takes either of these pawns. One thing I'll notice is that this pawn is pinned to the queen. So we see queen here, this pawn, if that moves we can take that queen. So that'll start the juices flowing a little bit. So queen capturing either of these pawns isn't really going to do it for us. But if we notice that pin, that might start to get some juices flowing. So what other captures do we have? We have rook takes bishop. Now we just mentioned that this pawn isn't going to be able to take back because it's pinned to the queen. And so we kind of know unless they want to lose their bishop, they're going to have to take back with the queen. So if they take back with the queen, which they will, then we go back, a new move has happened. We look at our checks, captures and threats, and now knight here checks the king and it hits that queen. Lovely little royal fork. I think that's going to be our solution. Bang, they take, bang, take the queen. Happy days. Wasn't quite checks straight away, it turned into checks. It was captures then, and then it was checks. Okay, final one, just on the threats side of things. So we did our checks, we did our captures, puzzles. Spoiler, this one's going to be about threats. And threats are a little more amorphous. Threats are, anything from like pins, skewers, forks, your classic kind of tactical devices. But it's really just a broad catch-all term for anything you're threatening to do. So again, we can still go through our playbook here. So checks, we actually have 0 checks available to us at the moment. Captures, our captures both kind of stink. We've got like this, takes, push, it's okay. Not really though. Takes, rook will take, that's fine. Nothing too crazy there. So any other threats that we have, we've ruled out checks and captures. The threat is that we're going to push this pawn. We're going to promote this pawn to a queen. Maybe not a traditional threat. We're not threatening material, but we're threatening to win relative material. So I would count that as a sort of amorphous threat. And, with our rooks, always great to be backing up a passed pawn with a rook. So that really tells me they're going to have to scramble to stop this pawn from promoting or give up one of their rooks. That definitely smells like that. So I think like something like this, rook comes in here and that pawn is now going to be defended by this rook, so we can shift this rook across. They can either take and we can win a rook, or they can maybe pin this rook with check. There's a lot of things that they can do, but none of them equal them winning. They all equal us promoting a pawn or winning a rook. So let's push here, see what they have to say for themselves. Okay, they block. This is protected. Very crucially, once we move here, the reason they can't do something like this and attack this twice while we're attacking it once is because this is check. Hits the king, hits the rook. So they can either move the king and we can just take the rook and then eventually promote, or they can take with the rook and then we can take with the pawn and promote. So that's why this works. King just moves to get out of check. The operation still works, but it now means that the rook can move to take the pawn if it wants to. We get our king out of check, that's kind of a spite check, and we take the rook. So we didn't win the game, we didn't win, we didn't even get our queen out of it, but we won a rook. That's plenty of material, and a rook we're clean up. This is 2 rooks against 1, and they've got 1 more pawn, but we can just hunt that down very easily. So that is the threat side of things. I wanted to show kind of a little bit off the beaten path threat, where it wasn't necessarily like threatening a piece, although that can also form a threat. But threats, again, is the more amorphous. So you want to look for like pins, skewers, forks, undefended pieces, overloaded defenders. So threats is really where the meat and potatoes of puzzles is, in terms of like quiet moves, what you're like building up to. So that's definitely where you'll need to spend a bit of time, is when the checks don't look juicy enough, the captures don't really lead to anything. Then we get into kind of broader territory of like, okay, what's undefended? What can I, put extra pressure on? What can I pin? What forks are available? All that kind of stuff. So checks, captures, threats, count the material. If you don't know what's going on, count the material. Orient yourself in the puzzle, understand all of the pieces in play, and that orientation process, also a great way to kind of brainstorm candidate moves. And every time you make a move, you can do that same process: checks, captures, threats. It's also a really good way to play chess when you're launching an attack on your opponent in a live game. Checks, captures, threats is a really good framework to work through. Another thing I'll say is take your time. These are supposed to be hard. They're supposed to really rack your brain, and you don't have to do 1,000 of these a day. I wouldn't recommend that, but like 5-10 puzzles a day, all of that's really going to get the juices flowing. And another thing I would say is, don't just play and pray. Don't just say, oh, this looks okay, and wait for the red X or wait for the computer to be like, no, that's wrong, view the solution. Really spend time with them, because they all have like a logical answer to them. Some of them are fiendishly difficult, but generally playing puzzles at your rating, there'll be some sort of clues, some sort of hooks, and you will be able to solve them eventually. But try to think like all the way through of either you win like a clean piece, or you checkmate, or you win the queen, like different like clear winning conditions, rather than maybe just like playing something that looks good but we'll see what happens. Try to calculate a little bit further with puzzles, and it'll stand you in better stead. It's a more worthwhile experience doing that way. Another thing that I would recommend, and what we're going to do now very quickly, is play a puzzle rush, or if you're on Lichess, a puzzle storm, I believe it's called. They function in the same kind of way. It's where you do a series of puzzles in a row, and you can only get 3 wrong before like you lose, and you go for a high score. The reason I recommend doing these is because it puts some stakes on the line. There's a cost to guessing and getting it wrong, which I think is the most damaging way to play puzzles, is just guess, whatever. Puzzle Rush or Puzzle Storm takes that away, because you can't just waste all your lives. So we're just going to play a quick 3-minute Puzzle Rush. Again, I would probably recommend like the survival mode. It's a little bit longer form, but we don't have all day here. This is a YouTube video. So we'll play a 3-minute Puzzle Rush, and I'll talk through my process as I'm trying to solve these. Okay, so we'll play here. Any checks that are good? Yes, this check is perfect. It's checkmate. Okay, same again. Any checks that are good? This check is perfect. They start off pretty easy. A lot of them will be back rank mates like this, but that still falls under our checks, captures, threats. Check. That's checkmate. Any other checks here? Yes, this is check, and they can block a couple of times, but it's still checkmate. So we haven't really gotten out of the checks phase of things, but we might do here. No, we won't. This is check. Okay, any other checks available? This is a supported check. That's checkmate. So we're still on step 1 of the process. Just check. We're just checking for checks right now. Maybe this will be a little bit different. What do we got here? Perhaps this looks like a check that doesn't have a great response. Then this looks like a check that doesn't have a great response. Happy days, only checks. This was checkmate in 1, so that check, the first check we checked out. What do we have here? Okay, I think this one, we're actually in check, so that's the first check to check. And I love a nice little counter check. Counter check here, and then we're going to promote that pawn earlier than they will. So just bang, bang, bang. That one kind of fell out, but we did check our checks, and we had a counter check, which was nice. Checks work here. We can just take this, and then there's no way to block that. Check and check. Not going as fast as I would if I wasn't talking, but I am talking, and I want to. Check. This is no good because the rook can take, but this is very good. So that's check. I feel like we're only getting checks here, and that's fine. That's fine. Right. Well, oh, this is kind of a classic mate, but what checks do we have available? We've got 1 check here, and wouldn't you know, it's checkmate. Unbelievable. Any other checks that we have in our arsenal here? This check looks good. You don't want to go here. You don't want to lose your queen. This check looks good, and I think we can do this, and if they move, then we can do like that or something. That all looks fine to me. Let's try that. Oh, they didn't even make us play it. Happy days. Any other checks? This looks good. They'll block with this, but this is... We can just check again. Again, we're going very, very slowly here, although it's fine. Okay, checks, we have none. Captures, we have none. Threats, we have this. I don't think it's too much more complicated than that. If they take, we take. We promote with check. Bang, let's promote with check. Take the rook. How are we going to stop that pawn? Is there a fancy way to stop this pawn? Maybe just that. Bang. Okay, great. 15, middle of the road kind of score, but I hope it illustrates that we went through our checks, went through our captures, maybe didn't get up to the difficulty level where we start having to think about threats, although we did a couple of times. Anyway, that's puzzles. Wonderful fun. Great warm-up for your games. Great way to improve your chess. That's all from me today, folks. Have a good time and enjoy your chess.